started. Looks like we got some
Sure,
folks.
sure.
Yeah, no reason to keep everyone waiting. Okay, great. Well, let's get started. Well, good afternoon for those of you who are on the East Coast, and good morning if you're on the West Coast. Thanks for joining us for today's Bloomerang webinar, Loving Your Donors, 5 Things You Can Start Doing Right Now to Create Lifetime Donor Relationships. And my name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion as always. And today, I'm just really excited to introduce our guest. She's just one of the nicest people in the nonprofit world. She's someone I love to chat with offline and online. Pamela Grow. Hey there, Pamela. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Stephen, that's so sweet of you to say. And do you know the feeling's mutual and you know what it is? It's because we're Midwesterners.
Yes, that's right. Midwesterners are the best. And if you guys don't know Pamela, Pamela is a fundraising consultant. She's also the author of a book called Simple Development Systems, which you can check out. She's been helping nonprofits raise money for over 15 years. She was also named one of the 30 most effective fundraising consultants by the Michael Chapman Giving Show. And best of all, Pam's just an expert on what she's going to talk about today, and that is building lifelong donor relationships, because that's what it's all about after all. And if Pamela isn't someone that you follow on social media or read her blog daily, definitely do that, because she puts out a lot of great stuff. Her blog is one of a few that I go to just to kind of check out what's there and look for things to share. So definitely follow her after this presentation if you aren't already doing so. So Pamela, thanks again for joining us, taking an hour out of your day. I know you don't usually do webinars, so it's just a real treat to have you. So thanks again.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So what's going to happen today is I'm going to hand things off to Pamela, and she's going to run through her presentation. I had a chance to look at her slides a little earlier. She's going to share some advice. She's going to show some examples of things that nonprofits are doing today, which is going to be pretty cool to see. And after she's done with her presentation, we're going to jump right into a Q&A session, as we always do at the end of our webinars. So feel free to send any questions or comments through that chat box there. I know some folks are already talking there, and that's great. Pamela will see those. I'll see those questions, and we'll try to answer just as many as possible before the 2 o'clock Eastern hour. So don't be bashful about that. And just some quick house cleaning. I will be sending out the slides and a recording of the presentation a little later on this afternoon. And in fact, I just sent the slides over via the chat box right there. So if you want to reference those before, during, or after the presentation, feel free to do that. And if you have to leave a little early, or maybe you want to watch it again or send it to a colleague, look for that video link to hit your email inbox a little later on this afternoon. So Pamela, I'm not going to waste any more time. Why don't you take it away?
Oh, awesome, awesome. Thank you, Stephen, and good afternoon, good morning. Welcome, everyone, to today's presentation of Loving Your Donors, 5 things you can start doing right now to create lifetime donor relationships. Stephen and I were chatting a little bit before we got started, and I said I would be thrilled to have you guys all chime in throughout the presentation with your own ideas, as well as you, Stephen, because I'm always learning. Familiar with us. Stephen already introduced me, but I'm also the publisher of the Grow Report, which is a weekly e-news that was established primarily for small shop fundraisers to kind of give you the best of the best in one little newsletter every week. I'm also the creator of 100 Donors in 90 Days and something called the Donor Retention Project, which is a really great little tool from the founder of Movie Mondays for Nonprofits, and we've got interviews with a lot of donor retention experts. So that's about me, so let's get started. And it does seem like we've been talking about donor retention in the nonprofit sector seriously forever, doesn't it? And with really good reason. Because despite a lot of the talk, the numbers never seem to change much. And it was really disappointing to me because I learned just the other day, everybody's probably familiar with Kivy LaRue Miller, and she publishes the Nonprofit Communications Trends Report. every year. And her 2014 Nonprofit Trends Report shows that donor retention is really still not highly valued by a lot of people working in nonprofits. It reads that it's a hot topic, but are nonprofits doing more than talking about it? In our 2013 report, acquisition beat retention as a goal by nearly 2 to 1. And in 2014, the number of nonprofits selecting retention as a top 3 goal held steady at 30%, while acquisition fell from 57% to 53%. So my very first question to you guys out there, and I'm trying to speak up. Is this better?
That sounds pretty good, Pamela.
Do you know your retention rate? And if everybody could just kind of type in the chat box, and I'm thinking that because you are subscribed to Bloomerang, you do know your retention rate, but you're in the minority. Hey, look at that. Look at that. That's awesome.
Wow, I think I saw one in the 60s. That's really good.
76.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. I figured we'd get a different reaction from this crowd. Have no idea. Got a very simple way to calculate, and this is actually included in a resources sheet that I've put together that Stephen's going to be distributing to you after this webinar. But they've got this handy little donor retention calculator over on their website. And in the meantime, why your focus should be more on retention and less on acquisition, just know this, that the cost to acquire a new donor is 6 to 7 times that to retain existing donors. And if you can increase your donor rate by just 10% today, you'll actually enhance the lifetime value of your donor base by 200%. And that is pretty impressive. Look at what just a 10% improved retention rate will get you. To save money on your fundraising costs, and I think everybody is sort of looking to save retention. It's the smartest thing you can do. Are y'all convinced? I'm getting some notes that people are still having a hard time hearing me.
I can hear you pretty good. I've got my phone all the way turned up, though, so.
Okay. I am on a cell phone. So today we're going to be talking about 5 things you can start doing right now to create lifetime donor relationships. And my absolute favorite question to ask anyone in this field is, how did you get into fundraising? Because none of us typically set out to be fundraisers. I got started in the industry when I stumbled into a job working in programming and communication for a family foundation here in the Philadelphia area. And I love the work so much, and I loved learning about the region's nonprofit organizations that I decided that I wanted to work in the field. And then I landed my very first job, a development director position With a smallish nonprofit agency, our annual budget was around $3 million, and my task was actually to create a development department from the ground up. And I honestly don't need to tell you guys that it was incredibly challenging. With the help of a successful local businessman, this particular organization had run a hugely, hugely successful capital campaign 5 years earlier, but they hadn't done anything since. They had ignored their main donors. They had let their foundation contacts lapse. They belonged to some key community organizations, but they hadn't had any contact in years and years. It was a real mess. Records were missing. The fellow who had spearheaded the capital campaign had died. And their big money maker, their annual campaign in particular, had actually been mismanaged by 3 separate mail houses and was an utter, utter mess. For 5 years running, they'd been losing donors faster than they could bring new donors in. So I had a lot on my plate, and I set about creating a development plan. And my first step was actually redesigning that annual campaign. And then I remember that and I realized, oh shoot, I got to write a thank you letter. And at least I had that good sense, because according to Penelope Burke's landmark book, Donor-Centered Fundraising, only 4 out of 10 donors say they always receive a thank you letter after they make a donation.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually did about 20 donations in 2013 just to kind of gauge the response, and I think I got thank you letters from maybe 5 of them. But I have to tell you that my very first thank you letter kind of read like this, and this is kind of written, excuse me, to give you a kind of humorous idea of how very stilted and kind of unnatural most of us sound in our nonprofit communication. So the very first thing you can do on this journey is to actually redo your thank you letter. Say thank you like you mean it. And we're going to start out with what your thank you letter should include. And these particular guidelines were developed based on the research of Penelope Burke. You always do want to personalize your thank you letters, as in Dear Pam versus Dear Friend. And really, with technology being what it is today, there's just no excuse for a Dear Friend letter. You want to start out with a captivating offer. And I've got lots of resources for that in your resource sheet, but just imagine that you're writing a note to a friend and let that gratitude just kind of ooze. This is an example from a science center that I liked. Robots whir, reach, tide pools gurgle. When science comes into your life, anything is possible. And it's all because of you. The next thing, of course, is impact. You're not writing really an annual report here, but you just do want to have a line or two to let the donors know what they're accomplishing through you. We have an example here, and both of these examples are actually from the SOPI website, which I'll talk about a little later. This is an organization in Ireland. Nearly 2,000 times each and every day, you make all the difference in the world for troubled children. Your kind contribution means that XYZ charity can keep skilled volunteers standing ready to answer calls. Know how they can be in touch. Always provide a key person in your organization that they can connect with and a phone number. Always reference their gift amount and the past giving. Make sure your letter is donor focused. You want to make That letter should make clear that your work is only possible through them. And sign your thank you letters. Now, in your text, I've included tons of links with ideas for packing your letters with more punch. And a lot of them actually come from Lisa Sutton, writer in Connecticut. She's a friend of mine. She focuses on retention, and she is also founder of the Thank You Letter Clinic over on Sophie. She did this particular before and after example for my website, and it just kind of gives you an idea of how easy this little change can be. Can you all see that? Can you all read it okay? This is an organization called Hope Found, and this is a letter, which really isn't bad. And it includes Lisa's notes there. The after. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to read that.
Seems like they simplified it a lot.
That's just it, too, is that good communications often is so much simpler, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The importance of your thank you letter, you want to get them all organized and be prepared for any type of eventuality there. Thank you. I actually typically thank you for your annual fund donation. I typically, before I even start writing a campaign, I write the thank you letter first. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is that you don't forget about it and come up with some sort of thank you letter that's an afterthought, but it also puts you in the right mindset. Don't forget your email thank you. I've included several really fabulous email thank yous here. And keep in mind, when you're thanking, you want to have a specific plan for new donors. How are you treating your new donors? Are you treating them differently? You call a welcome kit, calling them with an invitation to join your organization's monthly giving program. I would love to hear if any of you guys have any ideas how you follow up with brand new donors. One of my favorite ways is actually with a welcome kit. And this can sound a lot more kind of complicated than it really is. It can be a new donor newsletter, an FAQ statement, an invitation to join monthly giving. You might have a special monthly giving package. This comes from one of my subscribers. I would actually recommend making a small donation or signing up for their email list just to get their communication. This is Nashville Rescue Mission. They are an organization down in Nashville serving the homeless. They do this welcome newsletter, and they get it printed. I don't know how many they get printed up, but they get it printed up about every 2 or 3 years. They change it. And so every brand new donor gets this welcome newsletter. And this is actually following the thank you letter. Thank you letter comes first, then comes the welcome kit that includes this welcome newsletter, a little letter, and a remittance envelope. The Pass It On packet. Remember earlier when I told you about the first job of mine, my very first job in fundraising? That particular organization had been so burned primarily by the mail houses, that they gave me no money whatsoever for donor acquisition. When the gifts started coming in from that first appeal, was to make a note of the gifts coming in from the longtime loyal donors. And then I put together something that I called my Pass It On packet. And at that time, and keep in mind I was juggling a ton of different things and just kind of doing it all in a one-person development office, I put together this packet that included a very heartfelt thank you letter and an introduction and a request for them to refer friends, family, and neighbors to our organization. And at that time, I included just a few extra appeal packets, along with, I think I had put together an FAQ sheet. And the response was amazing. I actually brought in over 100 new donors that first year using that technique. And a few of them actually later became major donors. And some of these folks that I sent this out to actually called and requested more packets. It was a really good success. And then I found this particular one. This is an exhibit. Are you all familiar with Sophie? Sophie is a website based in the UK, and it's the international, I forget what they call it. What is it? I just call it the best white file out there in terms of donor communications. I've got a link to this in your resources, and I've done this with a few clients where I put together a front and back kind of a thank you piece that's got a referral on the back. It works really, really well. I forgot about this. What about your lapsed donors? Sophie is spelled S-O-F-I-I. What about your lapsed donors? Here is a fabulous example of what you can do to let your lapsed donors know. This sample is from Ontario Nature. It landed in my mailbox late last year. I'll be honest with you that I only donated to Ontario Nature in the first place because a friend of mine worked there, and she doesn't work there anymore, and I don't have any ties to Ontario Nature. But this letter came in the mail, and immediately went online and made another gift. You are going to love this. I will include both there's actually a little survey. That's a good question. I'm just going to take that right now. Kim asks, what's the time frame to consider a donor a lapsed donor? I would say what is it that AFP says? They call them either Libunts or Cybunts. And Libunt is last year but not this, and Cybunt is some year but not this. It depends on your organization, how far back you want to go. I've had, and it depends on a lot of factors. I had a gal who's one of my members who brought back a lapsed donor who had not donated for 10 years. But most organizations probably wouldn't go that far back. Do you have any thoughts on that, Stephen? On how far back?
Yeah, what we say at Bloomerang is we say 2 years. That's sort of our philosophy. We tell folks when we bring in new customers using the database, we're pretty strict on saying if they have anything in 2 years, there's no point in migrating them over because they're probably not going to do anything. And that's a little more extreme than most people think, but that's kind of our benchmark is 2 years, honestly.
Yeah, and your situation's a little different because you're whether they even bring them over from their database.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the next thing we can start doing? A thank you call to a newly acquired donor yields 40% more revenue in year 2. That's a lot. Do any of you out there do regular thank you calls? Yay, yay, yay. Excellent, excellent, excellent. The word is getting out. One method that has worked really well for my subscribers and my members is this, and that's to create a regimen. And every morning before you even turn on your computer, before you check your email, before you do anything, just spend 15 to 30 minutes making donor thank you calls. This is from one of my subscribers. What next? The research tells us, too, that donors want to hear what their gift is accomplishing before you ask for the next gift. And what is the way of doing that? You absolutely need to become a master. How you're capturing your organization's stories and how you're sharing them. These are some various ways you can show impact. You can show impact through newsletters. Again, I've got an example because from Nashville Rescue Mission, because they do such a good job with their communications. Report, which can sometimes be as much as, a simple email. Getting back to your welcome kit is a good way to show impact. Social media posts. I've got some ideas on getting your program staff involved as well in resources. Here's an example of a really good Facebook post. Debbie asked a sample of a well-done impact report. I can actually send you, I can include it with the resource sheet. You can use video. This is one of my on the home page that shows exactly what they're doing. What's another thing you can do? Do you really know your donors? Are you surveying them regularly? I'm going to go back to that very, very, very first fundraising job. Remember when I told you about how their annual appeal was such a mess? Before I wrote the first appeal for that organization, I actually did one of the smartest things I've ever done. I went into the database and identified time supporters. And for each one, I sent a personal letter of introduction. I thanked them for their past support, and along with the letter, I sent a simple survey asking why they had supported us for so many years. Out of the 20, 18 donors actually sent in. I hadn't requested any money. Their feedback gave me the materials that I needed to write that first appeal letter, and some of their testimonials are actually still in use today, 14 years later. That's how powerful surveying can be. Do any of you do surveying? Oh, excellent. Kim says, we just sent out a survey in our fall newsletter. Response was very good. How often should surveys be sent out? That kind of depends on your organization, and I recommend putting at least 2 surveys into your regular communications calendar a year. But I kind of like to hear from Stephen on how they survey. I know that as a business owner, every time I send out an email, I send out my weekly report every week. There's always at least 3 clickable links in the report looking for feedback, even if it's something as simple as what helped you the most in this newsletter, or what are you reading these days.
Yeah, surveys are great. I mean, it just helps you do your job better because you don't have to wonder what people like and what they don't like. You can just simply find out and then give them what they want and what they like.
Absolutely. Now, some organizations actually track their donors' birthday. These days it might be considered maybe a little intrusive, but one thing you can do is keep the date of their first gift in your database, and then maybe send them an anniversary or an happy anniversary email on the date of their first gift. Here's some sample survey questions. You want to the purpose of the surveys is not just an org focus. It's a donor focus too. You're trying to find out not just why they support you and what they like about you, but you're trying to find out more about them. Animal rights organizations can do really well with surveying. Debbie mentions a survey would be a good time to find out what the donor's preferred method of communication is. Excellent. Yeah, exactly. Barbara says we ran a survey with an incentive, a drawing for free tickets to a holiday dinner event, and had a great response. That's excellent, too. I love the idea of and the last thing that you can do is to get your board on board. Some of the text didn't come through, Stephen.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. One of the most important things you can do is to stop asking your board members for names. Seriously. Instead, make it a point to really involve them in this gratitude process. One way you can do, a lot of ways you can do that, board thank you calls, handwritten thank you notes from board members. I had a client that was a religious organization. Most of their board members, when they had a board meeting, it was a big deal because most of their board members came from around the country. So what we would do, we would have a little thank-a-thon for about half an hour where we take a break, and I would have, hello? And I would have note cards and pens and names, and they would write handwritten thank you notes to donors. And the donors, the response was phenomenal. I still remember they would get calls from certain donors who were thrilled to get a thank you note from a bishop. Encourage your board members to share their personal stories about why they got involved with the board. Not that canned elevator speech, but a personal story. Every board member has a reason for why they got involved. And typically their reasons are far more compelling than the canned elevator speech. And have your board members invite donors to insider events. Have them ask your donors for advice. What are your thoughts? Arlene says, I have a hard time getting my board to do anything related to development. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. And I think that getting them involved in this gratitude process makes a huge, huge difference. Because once they start talking to donors, not with an intent to, but just to say thank you, the response is always absolutely phenomenal. Oh, Darcy says, our board members have an adopted donor that they contact quarterly, sending a Thanksgiving card, New Year's card, impact story, etc. I love that. I would love to follow up with you, Darcy. That's a great idea. I'd like to mention that. Whoa. That's great. Jennifer says, we put donor thank you calls in our fund development plan this year. All board members will receive 5 names a month to thank. That's excellent. So far we've covered why you should care about retention and how to write the perfect thank you letter, the importance of donor calls and showing impact, and how you can get your board involved in the process. That so resonated with me. So with such a huge focus on major donors, that we forget the people that have the deep connection to your mission. I'd rather have a donor base full of people without a lot of resources who care deeply than with rich people who don't. And I can tell you that I've worked with organizations on both sides of the spectrum, and I would so prefer working with an organization that has that donor base full of people who really care. The valuable assets that they are. And I just wanted to mention really quickly that I just read the book, 18 Minutes, Find Your Focus, Master Distraction, and Get the Right Things Done. It's by a guy by the name of Peter Bregman. And one of the stories that really stood out for me was the one he told about Jack LaLanne. Do y'all remember him from the juicing commercial? I kind of remember him from my mother exercising to him when I was a little girl. But the author told the story of his success. He was a fitness visionary. He was founder of the Jack LaLanne Show, which was actually the longest-running television fitness program ever. It aired for 34 years running. And he said that Jack LaLanne had one trick that was his real secret power, and that was ritual. Right up until, and I love this, his death at the age of 96, he spent the first 2 hours of every day exercising, 90 minutes lifting weights, 30 minutes of cardio, every single morning. And that ritual enabled him to achieve his goals of staying fit. And you can totally develop rituals too. So as we go into 2014, I really, really urge you to make donor retention your #1 priority and create rituals around it so that focusing on donor retention will become a habit for you. And I have to say that from what I'm reading in the chat box, so many of you are already there, which is really exciting. So where are we? A resource sheet, but I've also got a couple other resources here. There is Blackbaud just came out with Show the Love, Thoughtful Engagement to Retain Donors. It's a free ebook you can download over on their site. I have got a course that runs once a year called The Power of Thank You that I present jointly with Claire Axelrad from San Francisco, founder of the Clarification blog. And then there's also the Donor Retention Project, which is pretty cool. It includes interviews with Adrian Sargent, Lisa Sargent, no relation. Trying to think who else. Roger Craver. It's fabulous. So we are at question time.
Yeah. Awesome. That was great. Thanks for that presentation, Pamela. We do a lot of these webinars, and I don't remember any webinar that had as much interaction in the chat room as this one. So thanks for everyone who was a good sport. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, appreciate everyone being a good sport about, answering questions and sending their comments along. That was great, and there's been a lot of questions asked kind of throughout the presentation. If you've been maybe sitting on a question that is burning in your mind, we've got Pamela here for about the next 20 minutes or so to answer any and all questions, so send them over. And Pamela, I'm just going to start fielding them to you if that's okay. We've got a lot here in the chat box already.
That's great. I'm just really thrilled by what all our participants are doing. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a good one from Amy. I'm just kind of work down the list. Amy was wondering, curious to know how many of you do multiple different thank yous throughout the year. Do you change thank you letters each month? Do you change them monthly? Do you have the same letter? What's your philosophy on that, Pamela, in terms of kind of mixing up maybe the content of the thank you letter and how often you should do that?
Well, I hate to say this because it sounds like a cop-out, but it really does depend. It depends on, it'd be different for some, there's some organizations that really only send out one appeal letter a year. And there's other organizations that might send out anywhere from 4 to even 10 or 11. That newsletter that I pointed out earlier from Nashville Rescue Mission, they send out a newsletter every month, which is how they actually manage this. That's how they make $2 million a year just from their newsletter mailing.
Yeah.
Because they have a monthly newsletter. But typically I say quarterly. That's kind of a generic response to redo your thank you letters.
Great. Cool. Yeah, feel free to send any more questions. I'm just going to go down the list here. We've got a question from Jennifer, a really interesting one, kind of stood out to me during the presentation. She's wondering when a major donor decides to leave to support maybe a competing or a similar nonprofit, do you suggest just kind of letting them go? Would you fight for them? What would you do if a major donor maybe lets you know that they're not going to be supporting your organization anymore?
Gosh, I would definitely reach out to them and try to set up a meeting to find out why. Wouldn't you want to know why? I just talked to one of my members the other day, and she said that she had come on board and found in a donor's file, and this was a major donor, that he didn't want any thank you notes or communications. And he was a monthly donor who sent in $1,000 a month. So she abided by it. She didn't send in anything. And then the next thing she knew, he left. And she called him up, and it turned out that he did want those thank you notes. He didn't want to be bombarded with communications, but whoever had entered the information in the database wasn't really very clear. And he's actually increased his gift.
Wow.
So always try to reach out and communicate.
Yeah, at least if you can't convince them to stay, maybe they'll let you know maybe what went wrong. You
can
kind of
learn from that.
Absolutely. So Pam, you talked a lot about surveys. I love surveys. I know you do too. One of the listeners was wondering how often you should send a survey, and that's probably another depends kind of situation. But how often would you send a survey? Is it a yearly thing? Is it maybe quarterly would be good there as well as changing up the thank you letters?
You're right. I would say it depends, but I would say to integrate it into your communications calendar at least 2 surveys a year.
Okay, 2 a year.
And this is what I did when I worked in small shops. was I
Mhm.
used to do that. I used to just periodically, once a month, go through and find 10 to 20 donors and send them a survey.
Mhm. And when you do that, do you send it through snail mail or do you email that electronically?
Well, again, it depends. It depends on it depends. No, it depends what I find not a lot of nonprofits that really understand the power of an email list,
Mhm.
and they don't really have much of an email list. I like SurveyMonkey surveys,
Mhm.
and actually I just got a good one today that I got it too late to include in this.
Great. We've got a couple of questions here about board members. Betty was wondering about when board members make donor calls, what you can do to ensure confidentiality. Do you have board members call from maybe the office of the nonprofit? Where should they call from to ensure maybe confidentiality? I'm assuming Betty's concern there is maybe someone would overhear the call or kind of know the amount of the gift there. What's your thoughts on that?
Again, it kind of depends. Typically, the board members that I've worked with have made the calls on their own time on their cell phones or on their home phone. Um, I've done thankathons at board meetings, but I typically do the handwritten note ones because I happen to like handwritten notes. But I know other consultants, they'll just have everybody use their cell phone and go off to a private area during a board meeting and make those calls.
Okay, so definitely a private area.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, our friend Amanda, she's listening in. She's wondering what are some effective and creative ways to thank major donors. So she's maybe a little tired of that typical kind of plaque recognition. What are some ways that you've seen people kind of uniquely thank major gift donors?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it really depends on the major donor. Some organizations do it with events. I'm not a big fan of events because I personally don't like going to them, but love them. So it really depends on your donors, and that's why I suggest really getting to know your major donors on a very individual basis and finding out what it is they like.
That makes a lot
But
of sense.
I'm gonna ask a friend of mine that question, and I'll get back.
That makes sense.
Forward it to you.
So here's a good question from Lori. Lori's wondering, do you have any suggestions on securing donor visits so that you can build their relationship? What do you say to intrigue them or generate enough interest so that they meet with you face to face? So maybe she's struggling a little bit with getting that one-on-one meeting with a donor. What tips would you have for Lori there?
Oh, I'm sorry, I got distracted. I was looking at the questions. Can you repeat that?
It's Lori's there. It's kind of towards the bottom. She's looking for tips on getting a one-on-one meeting with a donor.
Well, find out if any of your board members knows the particular donor personally, who's got the strongest connection. That'll kind of guide you.
That makes sense. Melody has a kind of a similar question. She's wondering about the appropriate timing to invite a donor for a tour. So should it be after maybe their first gift or a couple gifts? When's it appropriate to maybe invite them to the facility to meet?
I've kind of always, again, it depends on the organization, but I have typically included that right in the thank you letter, that we would love to have you by for a tour, give Debbie, development director, a call and set up a time. Always leave it open. That's a good comment from Larry. She says, I always ask them to meet to discuss their lives and life experiences, which opens up a lot of their personal drive for our organization.
Nice. Very good, Larry.
Yeah, very good. Excellent.
There's a question from Melissa, and I know she sent it a couple of times, so I want to make sure we get your thoughts on it, Pamela. How do you feel about electronic signatures on letters? And I think what she means there is maybe it's a printed letter, but the signature is, printed electronically. It seems like you would want, the person to at least take the time to write the signature themselves. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Pamela?
I'm a big fan of the handwritten signature, and I'm a big fan of handwritten notes. Again, keep in mind that I primarily work with smaller nonprofits, small to mid-sized nonprofits, that they're not processing thousands and thousands of gifts. But even in organizations that I've worked at that were larger, I just get a band of volunteers together and sign.
Right.
They don't know
but,
it's not the CEO's signature.
But handwritten is the way to go.
Handwritten's the way to go.
Nice. We got a neat question from Eileen. What's the best way to engage donors when you have a challenging cause? So maybe the cause is something as sympathetic as puppies and babies. That's sort of a common problem here. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Everyone has got an emotional cause. Everyone. Remember, I talked a lot about my very first job because I got a lot of great lessons on that job. This was actually working for our local EMS provider in the burbs. It's an ambulance rider.
Not the sexiest topic.
Not sexy at all. And a huge part of my challenge was that I live in a very wealthy community, but most of the people that live here work in the city of Philadelphia, where the ambulance service is provided by taxpayer dollars. So I had to communicate the fact that, no, out here it's not. It's provided by donor dollars. And also figure out a way to make it sexy, to make it emotionally compelling for them. And the way that they had put it across before was to talk about how great their equipment was. They had the best life-saving equipment. Nobody cares.
Right.
But when I found out, how they had really touched the lives of people in the community, that's when I got somewhere.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I always think of Apple when someone mentions, talking about the equipment versus talking about how it's making an impact. If you see an Apple commercial, they don't go through the specs of the device. They show, the impact it has on people's lives. It seems like that's a pretty good model.
That emotional impact and community re-entry after prison.
Yep.
That's an emotional, gosh. It's all about the why, Larry says. You're so right.
Well, we've got about...
Good one. Can I just
go ahead.
Real quick, because it's so cool. Roxanne says, we manage hand signing all thank you letters by having a stewardship coordinator sign up to a certain gift level, annual giving manager in the next level, and ED at top. Spreads out the responsibility. Yay,
very good.
That's excellent.
Very good. That seems like a good system for sure.
You guys are awesome.
Why don't we do about one more question? I know we say we keep these to an hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time before we do a little house cleaning at the end. There's a question here that jumped out at me. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but we'll send some contact information for Pamela a little later on. This one comes from looks like Lalitha, and Lalitha, if I'm pronouncing that name wrong, I'm so sorry. Please feel free to correct me. But she has an organization that's heavily funded through corporations, and they're kind of just now starting to build their individual donor base. And wondering, Pamela, what suggestions you would have for them. This is an organization that has gotten a lot of corporate funding and is just trying to build up those individual donors. What advice would you have for her there?
Do you have some individual donors?
Yeah, it looks like they have some, but not many. Just trying to start building it up.
I guess I would start by reaching out to those individual donors that you do have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many we're talking about, if we're talking about 10, if we're talking about a couple hundred, but if you can reach out to a handful of them one-on-one and find out what it is about your mission that compels them to give,
Mm-hmm.
under 100.
Under 100, okay.
I would start with that. I don't know if you've done any kind of individual appeal yet. Pass it on package would be a great idea. I was just about to suggest that, Linda.
Hey, Pamela, what is a pass it on package? That's not something I'm familiar with, and I think there were a couple people who hadn't heard of that either.
Well, that's because I just made it up.
Oh.
But I was surprised to see that the example that I shared with you all came from Ken Burnett, the founder of Sophie himself, from when he worked with a smaller organization that didn't have any money for acquisition back many years ago, and he done the exact same thing. It's basically like a referral package, and you send it out to people, particularly people who are loyal donors. I'm trying to find that example. I've got one I did for a client that I could include.
There it is. Yeah, we'll send that out to you folks in my follow-up email. We'll be sure to send that over.
Sorry about the Latin there. That's not part of the presentation.
Oh, I see. Introduce a friend to us. Oh, that's nice. That's a nice resource for sure.
Everybody doesn't respond, but it works really well. Really well. Yeah, the resources are going to be in a follow-up email. I hope you guys are great. I'm getting so much just from reading the comments. Is this actually, can I get a copy of the chat?
Oh, sure. I'll send that to you for sure.
That would be awesome, because I would love to connect with some of the people.
Yeah, this was fun. This was a little different than our usual webinars in that it was, a little more interactive, and I certainly enjoyed it. Hopefully everyone else who listened and participated enjoyed it as well. So Pamela, thanks for joining us for an hour. Thanks for sharing all your expertise. And I want to give folks a little bit more information about you. How can folks learn more about what you're up to and find you online?
Well, I just want everybody for sharing all your fabulous ideas. I just love it. Yeah, you can find me at PamelaGrow.com. I also wanted to share with you that if you're looking for more committed donors and sustainable fundraising and a happier, healthier organization in 2014, my membership program just opened up. This is Simple Development Systems, featuring all of these awesome people. Features a full year's calendar of training for your staff, board, and volunteers by the industry's leaders, courses, and support, and it's really for way less than the price of a conference. So you can also find Simple Development Systems at PamelaGrow.com.
Yeah, check that out. Those are, that's a killer lineup. Those are the rock stars. You've got Tom Ahern, Kiwi Miller. That's a great community that you've been able to build around yourself, Pamela. So that's really awesome.
Oh, thanks. They're awesome. And Gail Perry, yay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. We do these webinars every week. We're actually going to take next week off because we did 4 webinars in January already, but we've got a really nice lineup for February. We've got Donor Search on the schedule. They're going to join us to talk about kind of using data and prospect research to find donors. We're going to be partnering with Nonprofit Hub to talk about donor retention. And then we've got 2 consultants, Kent Stroman and Robert Sweeney. They're going to join us as our guests just to kind of share their knowledge with us. So yeah, that's a great lineup. I'm pretty excited about February already. So if any of those look appealing, check out our webinar page. You can register for those. They're totally free, totally educational. Check those out. And hopefully you enjoyed this presentation as much as I did. And thanks again to Pamela and everyone else who was a good sport about just being active in the chat room. It was really a lot of fun. And just one last quick note, I will be sending out the slides and a recording a little later on this afternoon, so look for that. And I'll also be including Pamela's resource sheet that she mentioned. It'll have all the good stuff that she sort of referenced in her presentation, all those thank you letters and pass it on kits and stuff like that. So look for that a little later from me this afternoon. And since it's 2 o'clock, we'll call it a day. Thanks for joining us. Pamela, final thanks to you. It was fabulous to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Oh, I did. I just put two. I just saw I put an extra O in Bloomerang. That's a little embarrassing. Don't put three O's in Bloomerang. Only 2 O's. So sorry about that. Well, thanks to everyone who joined us. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend if we don't talk to you. Bye now.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.